I don't think we need to go get your water.
Okay.
We can go forward with showing the stuff that's easily Googleable.
Yeah.
Unless there's a general interest.
Okay. We'll just bounce off each other. Just make sure, like, if you're like thinking that that's something you want to skip in for some reason, I'm covering just say like a minute later.
I'm just gonna start.
Yeah, go for it.
Cool.
We'll get out of here.
Hey guys, welcome back to RC3. It's week 8. There's a lot of new faces this week, so hey, welcome. Yeah, so if you guys can do me a favor, just go to signin.rc3.club. That's how we know how many people are coming each week. That's how sponsors know, and that's how we actually can say, hey, sponsor us so we can do cool things with these cool people. Yeah. How'd everyone's midterms go? It's good. Same. Okay. Yeah. Otherwise, we're going to start with our sponsors first. There's just a big thank you to them. Grimm IO, and these guys. Who knows who these guys are? Who, no?
No.
Sig? No?
Sig.
Maybe? You guys want to introduce yourselves really quick? You guys want to say?
Yeah, I'll do that real fast. Hi guys, I'm Liz. I work with these lovely gentlemen at SIG, so Susquehanna International Group. We're a high-frequency options trading firm down in Philadelphia. Essentially what that means is we work on the stock market, and we've got a pretty cool security team who keeps us secure and safe and make sure that all of the information and what's going on is going well. If you guys want to learn a little bit more about it, I'll be here after the RC3 ends, so happy to answer any questions you have. We have full-time roles, internships, things like that we're looking for, but I won't take up too much of your time about that now. We can always chat about it later.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, no?
I'm Matt Janetto. I run the stock and IR team at Citi.
Cool. And I'm Chris Lee. I'm one of Matt's stock analysts at SIG.
Cool. Thanks, guys. All right. We're back on. Thanks. Yeah, so they're here this week. I'm sure most of you know that they're going to be doing our demo and presentation. But welcome back. Make sure to join the Slack. Make sure to sign up for the newsletter. Make sure to listen to Answer, our weekly newscast. That's at listen.rc3.club. And also, any feedback you have, you can go to the type form. It's really pretty. It's just, yeah, it makes you feel good when you tell us what we're doing wrong. Otherwise, by popular demand, here's the schedule. So forensics is this week, and next week is going to be crypto. They're reversing binary. You guys can also see that via the site. Otherwise, important dates and times. The Parsons CTF is tomorrow, so definitely be here. They're looking to interact with students. They set up like an entire infrastructure to just let you guys do some challenges. That's a great way to kind of practice for the upcoming CTF for RC3 on November 17th to 19th. Signups have actually officially started, so if you go to rc3ctf.rc3.club, you can sign up with your team. You have a max of 5 people on your team. Otherwise, ShmooCon tickets go on sale November 1st. Those last year sold out in less than 10 seconds. So what we do is that we all come here in the Sec Lab, use RAT's really fast internet, and try to buy as many tickets as we can, and then we try to kind of distribute with our friends.
Practice your refresh keys now.
Yeah, just practice. Control. What's up?
Do you know what time on November 1st?
I have no idea. I'm going to
12
say
o'clock.
probably, yeah, 12 p.m. EST.
I'm here at 12 p.m.
All right, cool. I'll see you guys here. Otherwise, talk to Kyle if Kyle's not here. Okay, well, if you guys go to Sparsa, you might see him. But talk to Kyle if you want to be part of the University of Buffalo Attack and Defend competition. What's up?
Where can I sign up for this awesome RC3 CTF?
rc3ctf.rc3.club.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll post the link up on this. It'll update for you guys later. But yeah, that's November 18th. It's the same week. You're welcome to do both. You're welcome to do one or the other. It's a really good opportunity just to see. It's very beginner focused. It's a good opportunity to see what attack defend competition actually looks like. Also, CCDC tryouts are Fridays 6 to 8. So after Sparsa, everyone kind of stays here and then doesn't leave until like midnight. Otherwise, Witter, if you guys don't know, we actually record Answer in their studio, and we also record other podcasts and other information in their studios. So we're really grateful that they let us use their like tens of thousands of dollars of equipment. But they want to let you guys know that they're hiring. They actually pay for the positions. So you can be an internal web developer, which pays $10 an hour, or you can be a staff engineer, which pays $55 a week. Both you're required to work 4 hours, and they're very different. One's a developer position, one's more of an operations. They're super interesting. The guys there are really cool. Yeah, but click those links, apply. Otherwise, So announcements, but before I make the announcement for Junior Tech Lead, I just want to say we had a record-breaking number of applicants for our junior positions, which is like crazy. Just that blows my mind, like the fact that you guys are so interested and passionate about this. But for Junior Tech Lead, it was a really hard decision because there were so many of you guys, and we want, like, honestly, if we could pick everyone, we'd pick everyone. But for Junior Tech Lead, it's nope, it's Simon. Where's Simon? Hi, Simon. All right. You want to give a speech? Do you want to say something about yourself?
I didn't prepare a speech.
All right.
Thanks.
What year are you? What do you like to do?
I'm a first year, and I just like learning as much as I can, and I really enjoy the RC3 meetings, and I've learned a lot since coming to RIT.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, we're really excited to have Simon on the team. Also, we picked our junior ops position, which is... Where's Zach? I don't know where. Oh,
Right here.
hi, Zach. You want to say what year level you are and what you like to do?
Hi, I'm a second year CSEC student. I love Linux and web and learning everything I can about computer systems. So
Alright.
excited to be part of the team.
It's Zach.
Wait.
Yeah. What? Who's that? But we also have our assistant treasurer position that will be announced soon after we do our interviews and stuff. Also, we'll have other positions open up in the future. Like, we hope that everyone applies or nominates someone to do it. We literally can't do the club without people. So please do it. Otherwise, disclaimer before we start, everything we teach is for educational purposes. Don't be dumb, don't be a dick. You know, same old, same old. You've been warned. Without further ado, here's Sig.
I can give a more in-depth spiel first. So, to expand on what I kind of said earlier, we are a trading firm, but I just wanted to tell you a little bit about us and how we got started and who we are. So we actually started as 5 college students like your guys' selves, so some friends who were actually professional poker players and decided they really like poker. We're doing okay at it, realized that, you know, this game theory thing that people have been talking about had some good applications, and tried their hand at the stock market and trading, and clearly they did all right, because now we're an international company. We have over 1,200 people in just our main office in Philadelphia. So they've grown from just, you know, five kids in the back of, you know, a building. So you guys can have lofty aspirations and, you know, do what you guys want to do too. As far as just kind of what we're about and what we do, obviously trading is a part of it, but we actually now have more people in technology than we do in trading, because it's so core to what we do. So depending on what your interests are, you know, obviously if you're here, security is a part of it, but we have a really great infrastructure in general, you know, really fast network. It's really important that we have really strong software developers as well. A lot of the things that we use and we build are all created in-house, just because we are very specific and we want to make sure we're getting exactly what we want. So we're very big on if it doesn't exist, let's make it exist. So it's a really cool place to be. We really love what we do, and like I said earlier, we're always looking for new people. If you're just interested and want to learn a little bit more about SIG and what we do and the projects, you know, talk to, you know, any of us, or come stop by, send me an email. I'll make sure they have it and you guys can reach out. But always looking for interns full time, and, you know, really excited to, you know, get to see what you guys do today.
You guys can also bother the guy in the SIG hat right here,
Yeah,
Tom.
Tom.
Tom, you want to speak a little?
No.
I broke some stuff.
I'll also let you know I brought some t-shirts, so at the end of today, if you guys want some really nice, free, comfy t-shirts, totally grab them. We like you guys wearing them. They're also super soft and make me happy.
Thanks, Liz. All right. I love how much you guys love learning. That's awesome. I love being in the room with the Stargate. I think that's awesome. ShmooCon was my first security conference. I went, I feel like it was 10 or 12 years ago, and I didn't miss a year since. And I was just kind of in your guys' shoes in a college program, and kind of thinking about how I was going to break into the security field. And my brother said to me, you know, why don't you just go to a security conference? just go, you know, whatever it takes, you know. He was my motivator. He said, go to a security conference and just, you know, I was like, well, I don't know anybody. He said, it doesn't matter, just go. And you'll figure it out. So I did, and I figured out how to buy ShmooCon tickets. That was the first challenge. And I got ShmooCon tickets and went, and you know, I remember going to the conference, again, it's 10 years ago, and just being there alone. You know, didn't really have many colleagues in the field, and I just kind of, you know, it was a little boring at some points and hard to get started. But and I went every year, and where I had this like boring or lonely feeling when I was first starting to go to the conferences, like after 3-4 years, all of a sudden I have all these people that I see every year at this conference that I spend time with, and I would get to the point where it was just annoying that I knew so many people at the conference that I couldn't go and do the things that I wanted to. I couldn't break away and find time to do the CTF, so I went from like total like loneliness at these conferences to like leave me alone. So for anybody that is thinking about going to ShmooCon this year, I highly encourage it. It's a great opportunity. All right, so can I give you this?
Yeah.
Go for it.
It's theirs.
At the slide deck. All right, so we have about an hour 50, Chris. So I think we're going to try to wrap up the presentation part of this in about an hour. We'll have some chance for Q&A. If you guys want to dig a little deeper into how to configure Sysmon and WEC, we'll talk more about that in a minute. We can figure out how we can use that time, but then we do have like a CTF style lab, a forensics analysis type challenge to let you guys get into and work on. So we'll see how this goes. We did a talk at FSI SAC's Fall Summit in Baltimore 2 weeks ago. And it was geared towards industry other security teams, other SOC teams in financial services. And what we wanted to tell them about was how we solved our endpoint visibility problems, how we got better at host-based, specifically Windows-based forensics, and how they could do it themselves using a free tool called Sysmon. And then we learned about the opportunity to talk here at RIT through Liz. We've had a lot of great people come to our team from RIT. We thought this was a great opportunity to get back to you guys and teach you a little bit about what we're doing within our team. So we thought about how we wanted to do this presentation and what we really wanted to focus on, and I think we were more interested in keeping it very similar to the way that we did the talk at FSI SAC, which was geared towards other industry professionals. We thought about, you know, we could really gear this towards how you could use this in a CCDC competition and tweak and tune it and in order to beat the red team, and you know, we'll try to sprinkle some of that in so you can try to understand where this could be practical in that type of competition. But I really feel like just seeing how you can use free open source tools, not open source, but free tools at scale on a corporate network, I think is just pretty cool. A lot of times you might see, you know, little research projects on Sysmon where it talks about how you could use the tool, but to really see it implemented at scale and have success with it, I thought was pretty cool. So we're going to stick to pretty much what we presented at that conference and evolve where we need to. So let's see, what do I want to talk about? If you go back a couple years, our SOC is relatively young. I feel like we've only had full-time employees in our SOC in the last 3 years or so. Currently we have 4.5 full-time analysts that work on our security monitoring team doing SOC and IR work. If you go back 3 years, we split one of our other teams and said one of the people is going to go to two of the people are going to go to the security monitoring team, and one of this other person is going to do more of the GRC role, the governance, risk, and compliance role. And that was the first time that we had full-time SOC analysts. And back then, our goal, our mandate was really to detect threats in the environment, and when we found them, get them out. So what we did originally was we really focused on network forensics, network logging. And that's because of the history of where our security team came from. We were very much the perimeter network security team. We had access to all the firewalls at the perimeter. We had access to the web gateways and the web proxies. We had access to the email gateways. We had repositories where we're dumping these logs. It was very easy for us to start with network forensics, and that's where we really built our program up. We started figuring out ways. I feel like I'm really close to that camera. I have no idea. But all right, good. We started to build SIM rules, or started to build analytics on top of our network logs to say, try to find command and control traffic, try to find malicious downloads and things like that. And we had some success there. We started to find compromised machines on our network, and then we'd go to those machines and we'd pull them off the network and say, re-image them, and we started having some success. But we also, as we started having successes and we started building a program and evolving our program to create this whole SOC function, we also started to reveal some new pain points. If you want to hit the next slide, Chris.
Yep.
Some new pain points that we hadn't felt before. We'd find a compromised machine, and we knew it was compromised because we'd see command and control traffic that was persisting on the network. And we couldn't answer the question, well, what's actually happening on this host? How did it get compromised? What was the root cause? What was the user doing when it got compromised? Were they looking at email? Did they have Outlook open? Were they browsing the web? Another question that we always had trouble answering is, okay, we know the system's compromised because we have very good perimeter network forensics. Did that compromised system start to move laterally within our environment? And we didn't have good internal network visibility, so we had a hard time trying to figure out if that compromised system is part of a much bigger attack. We were getting lots of good threat intelligence from groups like FSISAC, and so we're getting known bad domain names, known bad IP addresses, known bad URLs, and we're matching in our SIM our log data to this threat intelligence, and we're finding known bad network infrastructure. But we were also getting file hashes and file names and that sort of information from the same threat intelligence feeds, but we didn't have the logs, so we didn't know how to take advantage of it. And we knew that would be a quick win. We had ideas too. We knew that if we only had some visibility into what was happening on our endpoints, we knew that the common attack technique at the time still is you get a mouse spam email, it has a malicious Word document, the user opens it up, they click enable macros, some malicious code runs on the box, and then the system gets compromised. We knew that if we had access to those process logs and what processes were spawning and what processes were spawning off of Word, that we would be able to write SIM rules to detect that stuff as soon as the user clicked enable macros. So we had pain points and we had a lot of good ideas, and so it was kind of obvious at that point in time that we wanted to venture out and evolve our SOC into getting not only being good at network forensics and network visibility, but also being good at endpoint visibility. And the other challenge that we had with this is we had to do it on the cheap. Because we were a growing team, and because we still wanted to vet out this idea before we we didn't have a budget. The company wasn't saying, here's all the money that you want, go buy a solution. Right? We had to prove the value of it before we could get to that point. Not only for the company, but for ourselves. We had to make sure that we were on the right track. So we had to find a solution that was going to fit that, something to get started. And so around the same time, we started to learn about the tool Sysmon. It's been around for a while, but you just started to hear conference talks about Sysmon and what it was capable of. And you would start to see blogs from security researchers saying, oh, here's this red team technique, and you can detect it if you just use Sysmon. Here's an example that I did in my lab. And you start to see those blog posts come up, and you start to see Twitter conversations throughout the security community saying, talking about Sysmon and how it could be valuable. So that was all happening right around this time where we were looking for that stopgap solution to try to prove the value of what Sysmon can do for us, or what endpoint visibility could do for us. So we said, well, let's give it a shot. Let's start here. And the original idea was we'll start with this proof of value, right? We'll take Sysmon, we'll install it on some systems, we'll get some SIM rules, we'll get the logs in, we'll have some SIM rules, we'll show it's valuable, and then you know what, we can go to the business and say, we think this is really valuable, let's go buy Carbon Black, right? Let's go buy some commercial solution. That was the original idea, but what ended up happening is Sysmon solved 80% of the pain points and problems that we had for basically free hard cost. And we didn't really have a need to go and buy an expensive commercial solution. All right, so let's jump over to the Sysmon talk. So we're going to give a quick overview. This talk was never designed to be a Sysmon 101 talk, intro to Sysmon. You can Google that. That's all over the place. That's, that was 2 years ago. the gap that we see now is how do you take Sysmon and scale it on an enterprise network? How do you scale it to thousands of systems? How do you bring it into your SOC and get the value from it in real time from your SOC, not something that you're just spinning up in a lab? And so that's the challenge that we had to solve. We knew it had the potential, but we had to solve out the problem of how do we scale this up for an enterprise. So, but I do want to give you a quick Sysmon 101 for the uninitiated, for the people that haven't heard of Sysmon before. It is a sysinternals tool. If anybody's done Windows administration, you probably have come across sysinternals. It is a security tool. Despite the name Sysmon, they should call it SecMon because it's totally a security tool. It installs as a service. It's super lightweight, and it just logs lots and lots of things from a security context on a Windows box. It's not going to be the tool that you install, and it's going to say, okay, it's not an IDS, right? It's not going to say, oh, I saw this specific bad activity, you should go look at it. It's going to give you that rich, verbose, forensic detail of everything that's happening on the system, and then it's up to you to layer on the analytics on top of it so that you can do real-time detection, so you can do forensics investigations and things like that. Sysmon isn't going to solve that analytical problem. It's just going to give you all the data that you need to do that analytics. Ew. What happened here? Is this on the second slide, or did we just totally get it cut off?
No, I think it got cut off.
Oh, that's sad. All right, so if you guys like the lab, the CTF portion of this is probably the most important slide. But it's really unfortunate that the other half isn't on there. So I'll talk through it the best I can. There's, what does it log? What does Sysmon log? The one that you're going to get 95% of the value from is the process created events. Every time a process is created on a Windows system, it's going to log it. It's going to log the file that created the process. It's going to log the hash of that file. It's going to log the command line that was run to create that process. It's also going to tell you what the parent process is, as well as the command line for the parent process. Yes?
It is on the next slide. Actually, you just click like 3 times and it's there. There are animations.
No, there's a second column here that's missing. That's the rest of the event IDs. But that's all right. Did you distribute the slide? Did we distribute the slides?
Yeah, but if we update it, it'll just update on their site.
Great. So, so the process created, again, is going to give you every process that gets created on a Windows system. We get 99% of the value. The forensics investigation, we almost always are primarily looking at a Windows, at the process created events. You can get a really nice picture of what was happening on the workstation or on the system at the point of the compromise. Event ID 2. I'm not going to do everyone, but Event ID 2 is time stomping. If you're familiar with time stomping, manipulating the attributes of a file and when a file was created, accessed, modified, things like that. It'll detect when something modifies the time of a file via time stomping. Number 3 is network connection events. This helps us solve that internal network visibility problem. When a system is compromised, how do I know what systems on the internal network that it talked to or tried to compromise or pivot to? So every network connection that happens on the host, you'll get to see those network connections. You'll also get to see what process and user that it's tied back to, which is really valuable from a forensics perspective.
You can think of it like it's an enhanced NetFlow, really. So if you've ever worked in a network lab with NetFlow before, you're getting that network visibility, but you're also getting the benefits of, since it's running on the endpoint, you're getting that process data. So you actually get the process that's creating those network events.
Driver load, drivers that are loaded, the hashes and the signatures of the drivers that are loaded. Number 8 is create remote thread. So if you're familiar with process injection, this is going to log the more common types of process injection. So if you're talking about if you're in Meterpreter and you want to migrate to another process, that's going to trigger your create remote thread. Sometimes when you're running Mimikatz on a system, it's going to trigger create remote thread. Process access events are number 10. This is when a process accesses the memory space of another process. This is another one that Mimikatz is going to trigger, because Mimikatz, the way that it operates is it wants to dump the credentials out of the memory space of the lsas.exe or the winlogin process. In order to do that, it's going to need to make the API call that triggers the process access event. So you'll see Mimikatz accessing the memory space of another process. It'll tell you when certain files are created. There's a file create, it'll tell you the process that creates it. There's another one called file stream create, and that one will actually give you the hashes of the files that get created. When alternative data streams are created on a Windows system, it'll log those. And when things get downloaded from the internet, they tend to have the mark of the web on them, if you're familiar with that term, and those are tracked using alternative data streams. So you effectively can get every file that gets downloaded from a web browser or from an email that have the mark of the web will get logged with file hash information, which is really valuable. Registry Events, you can configure it to capture certain types of registry manipulations. Most common is being like an auto runs type of thing, or what do you call it, like the run key when you want to have persistence. File created stream. There's some other ones that you're not seeing up here. Pipe events for inter-process communication. WMI events, we haven't really cracked that one yet, but it has something to do with WMI. But what we're seeing is that the new types of processes that they log, when Sysmon rolls out new versions, which they do every month or so, the new processes that they want to cover are very, very much security related. They're very much related to the new techniques that malware is using, or new techniques that advanced attackers are using to move throughout your network. Cool. Anything else there?
I don't think so.
All right. So that's kind of setting the stage. That's where we were and where we're trying to get to. That's the Sysmon 101 portion. I'm going to hand it over to Chris. Chris is going to talk to basically how did we really scale this out? How did we implement this in a corporate environment?
Go.
Thanks, Matt. All right, so real quick one first. Can everybody see me down here? It's a little low. In fact, I'm going to just do that. There you go. Problem solved. All right, so Matt kind of already gave a little bit more in-depth with what this stuff will log. And how many of you, just show of hands, have ever worked with Sysmon or messed with it during any competitions or any usage? Okay, just a couple? Cool. Do you find it useful? Yep. All right, good. Right answer. All right. So let's kind of get into the story from what Matt talked about, right? He talked about how we started getting value out of it and what we wanted to do. In a corporate environment, right, we're working in with a ton of machines. We have 5,000 endpoints that are going to be running this. And, you know, we can't just dive right in and just say, let's turn all this stuff on. You know, one of the things that does happen when you log all of these events is it generates a lot of noise. There's a lot of logs that get written. And that can have performance implications, that can have, you know, just a ton of other implications, especially when you're talking a corporate SIM solution or an environment where you have a regulated data rate that you need to you know, maintain or be under. You got to take that into consideration. So to Matt's point about process creation events being the thing that we got the most forensic value out of, that was our first goal, and that was the first thing that we wanted to tackle. Since we were using this as a kind of an endpoint detection utility, that was our starting point and our jumping in point. And what we did was we took a collection of our security systems and we applied Sysmon to these hosts. And again, since it's a lightweight surface, it was real quick. It was a one-liner to install. And the nice thing is you can pick and choose what you want to actually log with this, so that if you're using this both in an environment or in a competition, you don't have to turn all of this stuff on. You can pick and choose and say, give me the things that I care about. So for us, it was that process creation data. And what we did is we pushed that into all these machines, and we said, anytime anything gets spawned on an endpoint, we want to know about it. And we did that, and we did it against 20 systems, and it was actually a relatively decent amount of data in terms of data rate. We weren't getting all sorts of events back. It wasn't overwhelming. It wasn't hurting the systems, and it was really easy. Like I said, we did it with one line, and it took 5 minutes to push to. And all of a sudden now we're getting all of this endpoint data from a process creation standpoint right within the Windows event log. So one of the things too that we didn't cover with this is this gets written right into the Windows Event Viewer. So if you're already looking at application, system, security logs, if you actually pull down into the application logs and you go down into the Microsoft software Sysmon folder, this is written to its own log, and all of these events get generated there. So even if you don't have a SIM solution and you don't have a place that you can push all these to, you can view this data right within the Windows Event log. And this is exactly what we're getting, right? We're now getting all sorts of information. We get the actual process that ran. we get the included command line with parameters. So if you've got command or PowerShell running and it's running with a set of parameters, you'll catch that. You'll get the process hashes as well, right? You'll get MD5, SHA-1, SHA-256, and then this is that big piece from that parent-child relationship portion, right? The parent image and the actual parent command line that ran. And that's huge from a forensic standpoint. When Matt was talking about Word doc macro malware that you've hopefully seen at this point, what you're getting out of this is you'll see macros execute out of Word and then generate a PowerShell process or a command line or another request. And the reason that matters is something like Microsoft Word shouldn't be generating other processes. So that's the kind of thing that you can look for and say, hey, that's not normal. This could be a good jumping off point of where we probably saw an original source of infection. So we started with that, and that worked really well, and it was really easy, and we didn't have to do a lot. So then we said the internal network visibility piece, right? That internal net flow was another really big piece for us that we wanted to solve, and we knew we could do it with those network connection events. So same thing, we applied that to those 20 systems, and we pushed this in, and we started getting network connection data. And if we take a look at this, this is going to be a very similar setup, and the key piece to this again being that we're going to get that actual process information. So now I'm seeing anytime this machine made network requests, and I'm actually getting the process that made it. So that if I know that something launched out of Word and maybe tried to pivot through the environment or pull something from the internet, I'm going to get the process and the actual application that's making those requests. I'm going to get protocol information, who it connected to, ports it used, right? All of that relevant details. So that now you can marry the image, the two events together. We can see that we launched this terminal services application from Explorer, which is just us opening it up. But then we can actually see that Royal TS made a 3389 connection to another endpoint. So we know somebody opened this application up and then actually RDP'd using it to another host. So while this is just regular, regular usage and nothing's necessarily suspicious about this, you can kind of think about how you could apply that to looking for malicious activity and malicious use cases. The only thing with this, when you're talking relevance from our corporate standpoint, is there's a lot of network connection activity, right? I mean, every endpoint is generating tons and tons of network connections. Chrome's constantly refreshing windows and tabs, and that's very, very noisy. So because we had this concern and we needed to make sure that we weren't hitting these, these limits that we had from a licensing perspective, we needed to do something to kind of get that filtering down. And what we did to accomplish that is use Sysmon's native filtering. So Sysmon not only lets you pick and choose what events you want to collect from event ID standpoint, but it actually lets you use an XML where you can fully configure and filter to your heart's content all of these events. So that in this case, network connection events, we can go ahead and we can look and analyze that data, and we can pick and say, we don't care about these things, don't log them. And we just pop them into an XML file and filter them out. And we'll cover it hopefully here in a little while, but how many of you are familiar with Swift on security? Okay, everybody knows Tay-Tay. So, Swift on security actually did a collaborative config for this, and the reason that I want to point this out is if you need a really great starting point, if you're using Sysmon and you want something to reference, that's out on GitHub, and you can take that and just apply it, or I would recommend reviewing it first and having a look and see what they did. But what they did is they collaborated with a ton of professionals and contributors and said, what are the things that we care about, what are the things that we can tune out, and understanding that level of noise and understanding each of these process events, each of these Sysmon events and what we care about from them. So I would highly recommend that when you have time, if you're ever diving in with Sysmon, go look at that config, because that's an excellent place to start, and that'll give you some really good ideas in terms of things that you might be able to filter out, or things that are just so noisy that you can focus in on and what are you going to get forensic value out of by filtering or including those. So we did that, and we we kind of reviewed the Swift config, and we reviewed some of the events that we were getting in Windows Event Viewer, and we tried to say, how can we filter this out? How can we get that network noise level down for our environment? And because we're in this environment, instead of having to just try and review them in event collection logs, which can be kind of difficult, we realized that we wanted to get this data into our SIM tool, which we do have a commercial SIM tool. We wanted to get that in there for two reasons. One, that's going to be where we're going to do that analysis and that alerting anyway. But two is to get better visibility into what kind of things we care about filtering, we can use that. You know, we can get that data into the SIM, and then we can use the SIM's natural ability to pivot and group data and understand what we're looking at, and then pick and choose and filter further. So in order to do that, in this slide, unfortunately, the transitions are not working. So you're seeing overlays. There's two ways you can do this to get that data into your SIM, whether it's a commercial tool or whether it's Elk or Splunk or whatever it may be. You can either, one, use your SIM tool's forwarding agent and apply that to every single endpoint and then push all that data to your SIM. The only thing is as you get into to some of these large, you know, multiple thousand endpoint environments, trying to put another agent on all these endpoints and using that to push, you know, to push event logs can be a little bit cumbersome and a bit of an undertaking, and it's not a lot of fun. So we didn't want to do it that way, and we wanted to do it. We wanted to do it quick, easy, and we wanted something that we could apply to every endpoint without having to put the agent on it. And then that's where this other utility comes in, Windows Event Collection. And I think you touched on it a little bit, maybe at a very high level. But if you're not familiar with Windows Event Collection,
Can we ask, how many people have heard of Windows Event Forwarding or Windows Event Collection? Pretty good. Okay.
cool. That's actually better than most of the corporate conferences we've gone to. Right, so Windows Event Collection and Windows Event Forwarding is native functionality built into Windows. I think 2008, Vista, something like that. And what that is almost if you're looking in a Linux world and you're talking about syslog, you can treat it in that same manner. You can stand up these subscriptions or these hosts that are just collection servers. And what you do is you specify the events that you want to collect from Windows endpoints, and then you can apply either via GPO or via a collector-initiated subscription, which I don't want to cover too much because we haven't dabbled in that. You can instruct your endpoints to take everything out of their native Windows log, which includes sysmon, and forward that to them. So now, instead of needing to push an agent to every single endpoint via group policy, we can apply a policy to our systems that say, hey, go check in with these event collection servers every 15 minutes and see what I should be sending.
Let me just echo what you just said. It's literally it's syslog for Windows. It's finally Windows built something that's comparable to syslog. Moving logs from one system to another now is native in Windows, and that I think is a big step.
Yeah, exactly. So we build these subscriptions in Windows Event Collector, and we'll show you this because it's very, very easy. It takes a matter of minutes to complete that. And now we'll get all that data, and that Windows event log will be forwarding into these centralized logging servers. And in our instance, we stood one of these up and said, okay, all these workstations that we're testing with and that we that we care about, let's get all of that data centralized into one location. And what it does is it forwards all of that data into the forwarded events log of Windows Event Viewer. And then instead of putting the agent on all of our endpoints, we now just need to take the agent and put it on one collection server and then say forward everything that you get here into the SIM. And doing that made it much, much easier. It was a lot easier for our support teams to swallow than saying we're going to put this agent on all these hosts. So we did that. I'm trying to think if I want to cover anything on here that we didn't do already. So we did that, and we started pushing all that data into the SIM. And if you've ever worked in a SIM environment, this is really, again, where the SIM shines. It's really great from a pivoting and analytics and grouping standpoint. So we started taking all that endpoint visibility that we were getting from a network connection of events and process-created events, and we said, let's actually do some level of filtering with this. Let's make sure that we're actually getting the data that we care about and that we're not generating more logs than we need. And when you do this, we did exactly that. We started taking the network connection events, and we started pivoting through that data. And with each iteration through that, we could identify what are the processes that are the top talkers from network connections. What are the most things? What are the things that we connect to most in the environment? And what we found were right off the bat, and you can kind of look at this up here. and it makes sense, web browsers talking to our proxies. That's expected behavior, right? We expect Chrome and Firefox and IE to be talking to our web proxies. That's how they communicate with the internet. We're going to use that solution. So from that standpoint, we have these web proxies and we're getting logs from them. And while that's generating so much noise, we already get some pretty rich logs for these kinds of, for these connections from those proxy events. So it doesn't make sense for us to really log it again on the endpoints and on the network connections. So for us, this was a great opportunity to say that's our first filter. Let's go ahead and take all the things that we know we have logging and visibility from in another standpoint, and let's push them out the window so that we're not generating duplicate events. And we did this a handful of times and just iterated through until we felt confident that the data that we were getting was filling that gap while not also generating duplicate information. Once we did that and we had that comfortable, configuration being applied via the XML, we kind of started rolling it out to additional endpoints, and we rolled from just the security team from 35, 40 endpoints out to the rest of technologists, and then ultimately traders, and at this point internationally, as I said, we're collecting from 5,000 systems with this model.
Cool.
Yep.
So we talked about SIM integration. You can think the same thing with Splunk, with Elk, any other log management tool. You can treat it the same way. It doesn't have to be a SIM for the analytical piece or the forensics piece. As you talk about it, I think about how would you guys apply that in like a CCDC type competition, just because that's the one that I'm familiar with. If I was in a CCDC competition and I had a sizable Windows environment, I would pick one system, forward all the Windows logs over WEC. I'd install Sysmon on my Windows systems, which you can do with a one-liner in PSExec if that's within the rules of engagement. I'd configure WEC to move all those logs to one system, and then I'd write a short PowerShell script or something to monitor that log on that system and say, show me anytime that PowerShell is run on any of my systems in my environment. And because my bet is that most of those red teamers that are using Cobalt Strike to move through your Windows systems are probably leveraging PowerShell in order to compromise your systems. And I can probably speak from experience because we just had our pen test last week, and our pen testers used Cobalt Strike, and they were lighting up all of our PowerShell rules. So as I think about it, right, obviously you're in a CCDC competition. I don't expect, I wouldn't expect a blue team in that type of competition to have a full-fledged SIM with all these like complicated SIM rules. You just don't have the time. But you could write scripts to monitor for the really obvious stuff that you would think an attacker would trip you on. All right. So we talked about what Sysmon is. We talked about how did we deploy it at scale. We now want to talk about that analytical level that we put on top of Sysmon, and how are we taking advantage of it within our SOC to detect in real time and to do forensics investigations. So we talked about those pain points or those desires that we had at the beginning. Well, now that we have this log data coming in, we have file hashes for the processes that are getting created in our environment. We just wired those up in our SIM. If we see an instance of a known bad file hash, just fire an alert. We also could do that looking for WinWord, launching PowerShell.exe or CMD.exe. If we see WinWord is the parent process launching one of those shells, we know that's bad, fire an alert. We get to know as soon as somebody clicks enable macros. I talked about PowerShell, just looking for suspicious PowerShell usage. If somebody is using dash encoding, do you remember what it was? Encoded?
ENC encoded command.
Encoded command is the full name. You can truncate that to -ENC or even -E. That means they're running a PowerShell script in a base64 encoded blob. Nobody does that normally, right? If you can find somebody running PowerShell and in the command line they're encoding something, that's a dead giveaway that you have somebody doing something bad in your environment. Or if they launch PowerShell with a hidden window, right? People that want to hide the window tend to be hackers. We have a lot of success off that rule. Most of the time when we catch commodity malware in our environment, it's because they're using one of those PowerShell commands. PSExec usage. You can look for instances of people using PSExec in your environment. So if they're using the normal PSExec binary that comes with sysinternals, you can catch that. Sometimes they use modified versions that are a little trickier to catch, but credential dumpers, I talked about it a little bit earlier, of being able, we wrote rules within our SIM to be able to catch when people are accessing the memory space or injecting into the LSAS or when login processes. All right, so we have an example of that one. We wanted to prove that out, so we put Mimikatz in our lab. We ran it on the box that was running Sysmon. Sorry, it's horrible to see, but we grabbed the debug privilege. We go to grab the login passwords. You can see that we successfully grabbed the login passwords. On the Sysmon logs, what you'll see is a process access event. You'll see that the source image or the source process is mimikatz.exe. The target image is lsas.exe. All right, so those are our real-time detections. But we think the most valuable process within our SOC is how we do forensics investigations. Being able to do fast, thorough forensics, comprehensive forensics investigations over and over and over again is the most important thing that we do. We have 4.5 full-time SOC analysts, and we fire around 3 dozen SIM alerts per day. We look at every single one, we investigate every single one, and document, the outcome of every single one. Each investigation typically takes less than 5 minutes because we have pretty good tooling and pretty good knowledge on how to do that investigation quickly. So the way that we handle doing it with these logs, as well as how we do it with our proxy logs, is we wrote PowerShell scripts. We wrote PowerShell scripts that basically pull the data out of our SIM and then put it into Excel, and then we have all the data in Excel, and we can quickly move through Excel and do our investigation. So there's 4 real pieces of code that do that. The first one is get process search, talks to the SIM, says give me the here's an alert number. Give me the subject of that alert, like what was the system that generated that alert, and give me the time that alert took place. Then it goes back to the SIM and says, okay, give me all the logs for that subject at that time, and give me a plus or minus 30 minutes, so that I can get context before and after that alert took place to see what was happening on that box at that time. So that'll go and talk to our SIM via the API, pull all the logs back into PowerShell in memory. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to analyze those logs. And we're going to do 2 things. First, we're going to say, well, what was the process that tripped this alert? And we're going to tag that as the suspect. And that's going to be our starting point. And then we're going to look at the relationship, the parent-child relationship between processes, and say, show me the processes that, the parent processes to that. Mark that as the parent. Show me the parent to that process. Mark that as the grandparent. And we also go down the chain. Show me, from the suspect, show me what processes were launched by the suspect, and we call them children. And what we build is a full chain of processes that took place. So if somebody opens Outlook, and then from Outlook they open a Word attachment, that opens WinWord, and then they enable macros, which enables some sort of PowerShell script, and then that downloads some other binary and runs it on the box, you're going to have that full chain of 4 or 5 different processes that ran. And what we're doing is enriching the logs in that PowerShell script. We're adding a field that says this is the parent, this is the suspect. And then we look for other characteristics that are interesting as well. If it's a cmd.exe, we call that an admin tool. If it's a process that's running out of the app data directory or temp directory, we call that app data. There's other ones, I forget what they all are. But anything that we can just look at any individual process and say, that's a little funny, let's just highlight that one. We'll enrich our logs that way. The third piece of code is what builds the user interface in Excel. We're going to programmatically open up the Excel using COM objects from our PowerShell script. We're going to take all that log data and we're going to paste it in. We're going to format all that data as a table. We're going to rearrange and format the width of our columns. We're going to set up our column headers and all that. And then we're going to highlight anything that we added a tag for. And at the end of the day, what you're going to get is an Excel file that we display to our analysts that have all the log data so that they can pick through and see the whole picture with the most interesting things brought to the forefront. The last one is the wrapper that pulls it all together. And so when our analysts do these investigations, they run out process search. They give it the alert ID from the SIM, and this file gets generated in 15 seconds. And we've got it to a point where we automate it. So the SIM alerts fire. There's a script looking for new alerts in the background. It'll generate these files, so when the analyst is ready to do the investigation, the file's already there ready for them to do the investigation. It's far superior to our SIMS interface. We struggle with the web interface on our SIM. It's a great brain, it's a great engine, does a great job finding malicious things, but doing those forensics investigations in the SIM is very painful. So we have a demo. I think this will be a good demo. Go back to I want to prep this one. So this looks great on our 24-inch monitors on our desk, and we really can power through these, and we get all that information up on the screen. But it really sucks when we try to do it on a projector in front of a room full of 50 people. So my apologies, bear with us. I just want to give you something to anchor to. What you're going to see is an Excel file with all that log data, right? Each line is a log. On the first column is going to be the timestamps. Everything is sorted chronologically. That second column is going to be those tags, those things that we find interesting. Then you have the event name, the username, the process name that was the name of the file that ran the process, or the name of the process. Here's the command line, and as you go to the right, you get the parent information as well. Anything that's highlighted here, the red is the suspect. That's usually the starting point of the investigation. Typically, we try to do a root cause analysis and go to the top. The orange ones are that parent-child relationships, and the yellow ones are things that are just interesting. There's nothing yellow up here. Nope. You just can't see the difference, but that's what the highlighted stuff is. Things that aren't highlighted is just the stuff in the background. The full picture's there, but it really gives the analyst the opportunity to focus on the things that are most important.
Oh, I'm sorry. Cool. So as we talk through this too, and it kind of sucks just from the perspective of, this is all fantastic and we want to cover it. I know that when we get through this is kind of a difficult thing to talk through for you guys to be able to say, hey, this is what you're going to use in competition or in CCDC, only because we built this out for us. But what we want to show you is if you have the time and you have the means to do this, this is the kind of thing that you can do to enhance that data. Just beyond having Sysmon installed, to this is how you can make it much easier to analyze and review. So let's go through that Word doc macro mouse fan. We love this one because for us, this is the kind of thing that we're seeing in the corporate environments all the time. This is the most common attack type at the moment because it's so successful. Because people love to click on email attachments even if it's in their junk email and open them up. So why not? Let's go ahead and dive through this. How many of you have had, through an internship or any other experience with these kinds of emails coming in? All right, cool. Probably a lot, right?
If you haven't, you're probably compromised.
How many of you witnessed this happen to somebody and actually get compromised? Not just receive the email, but while you're out there, see someone get popped for this. Okay, cool. Right, this is all very, very normal, commonplace. Somebody comes through and says, hey, your sysadmin wants you to open this secure Word document. Sure, why not? We'll open this up, and we get this nice little prompt that says, hey, to view this, you need to enable content and enable macros. For the sake of this, I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and enable this content, and I'm going to enable these macros. And what's happened is those macros have run. It's probably generated a PowerShell command to pull down an executable and establish C2, or it's doing any number of other things on the host. But that core point being that macro has now launched your first stage of malware. From our endpoint, when we look at this as an analyst, those Sysmon rules that we wrote, or those rules that we wrote in our SIM from those Sysmon events, from those process creation and those network connection events, we use those, and that's what we're generating and firing alerts on. So if I go through this now, as an analyst, I'm going to see 2 or 3 things light up here for this. I'm going to see the fact that Word launched a process that we're not comfortable with or that we haven't seen before. So there are legitimate use cases for that, and you have to be aware of that when you're looking at this, from a forensic standpoint, that will happen. But when you're using a tool like a SIM, you can look at all of that data and you can whitelist and you can accept those things, and then anything that isn't in your list of known applications is going to fire because Word just spawned that process. We also have some alerts for web requests to a malicious download site. And that's going to be coming actually from our proxy data, not from our sysmon data. And that's going to be based on categories that our web proxies use. And then we'll get some of these other things, right? Suspicious process launched PowerShell with unusual parameters. Exactly, right? The rule is exactly what it's stating. Some process spawned off of PowerShell, and it used some of those uncommon parameters. When Matt mentioned that encoded commands are not something that people use, regularly, or invoke expression is another function of PowerShell. Those types of commands, when they get run, they aren't commonplace. They shouldn't be happening, and when you see them happen, that's typically indicative of somebody using them maliciously. So we know the user opened this up. They enabled macros. Nothing happened. They went on with their day. We get alerted to this by lighting up like a Christmas tree for all these things that have happened. From our perspective, we're going to use these two sheets that we've created with those functions that Matt talked about. And we're going to dump proxy data and we're going to dump process data. And the reason that I want to highlight the difference between the two is the first thing that we're going to jump into is all we used to have that we could go off of originally before we had that sysmon data. So back on this previous slide when we said that this fired 3 or 4 rules, the only one that fired that would have been caught by the proxy data is that web request to a malicious download. So we would have had an inkling that something happened and we would have seen a web request that we weren't comfortable with, but we wouldn't have had any context in terms of what actually happened on the host. So let's go ahead and jump out of this here real quick and pull those proxy logs up. And this is definitely going to be kind of difficult to show you with the resolution, but we'll get that list. And what we did is we went and we said with those PowerShell commands that ran, go back to that event that fired and give me the 15 minutes before and 15 minutes after that event and dump all that data out to this and give it to me chronologically. And now we have that. We'll go through that, and what we'll see is we'll see top down every single web request that was made. For the proxy events, we're getting whether they were allowed or denied. We'll get user agent data. We'll get data in terms of the username that was authenticated against the proxy. We'll get the site that made the request, any of the specific URLs, and then any of the referrers. Yes?
Does your PowerShell script color code the bad ones for you?
Yeah, so what we did was, again, through COM objects, it's all programmatic. We said that anything that we do conditional formatting, depending on the value of the tags column here. So if there's a value in here, it'll automatically color it based off of conditional
That's
formatting.
super cool.
I just jump in real quick. It's 1:20 if you have class and you don't want to skip it. It's probably a good time to go. Like normally it's a presentation. Don't worry about it. But if you forgot to go to class, it's 1:20.
If you would like to go to class, I'm not offended. So for the sake of this, and to that exact point, that can be very time-consuming if you pop open this list and see every single web request that was made over the 30-minute period. That's hard to go through, right? You don't want to have to do that. So because we get that tagging and we get that logic, one of the first things that we'll do is, until we need a larger forensic picture and we need to understand maybe some additional stuff, we can actually just pop down those filters and say, only show me the stuff that got tagged because it matched those characteristics. And now what we're left with instead of 1,000 lines is 2. Yes?
You said one of the events that fired on in the scene was that it was a malicious, it downloaded from a malicious site, right?
Yes.
Why would you allow the download?
You son of a gun. We were trying to sneak that past you.
This is a lab.
We allow it in our lab.
Yeah. No, we did this. Yeah, we wanted to allow this in our lab in real practice, because this is tagged as by our web proxies as
Malicious site malware.
as a malicious site, right? High-risk malicious site. Yes, this would have been blocked. We could still fire an event on that, right? That could still be of interest to us, because if something's being, if there's a web request to a malicious site, we might want to know about it.
It could have been downloading a doc file from an uncategorized website, and that would have been allowed, but we would have got a similar for it.
The other thing with this is maybe downloading, maybe a web request to something with a high-risk site is commonplace enough that that might be too noisy, but you can marry it with other things. So you could say, give me only fire alerts for web requests to malicious sites where the user agent that made the request is uncommon, right? So somebody browsing the web with Chrome, IE, Firefox, they're going to have typical user agents. But if you see some user agent or no user agent at all making that request that might be indicative of an actual process outside of a browser downloading it, you're going to care. Just to speed this up a little, because this is the proxy side of this, this is all we would have seen from that first offense if we didn't have the sysmon data. We would have seen that there was a web request to these two domains here, right, for these specific URLs. In both cases, they both are a PNG file with the same file name.
Can we click on it and see, or blow up the font so you can see it?
Here?
Yeah. You can go down the bottom here too. Okay.
Boom.
Nice. There you go.
And this is all we would have seen. So we would have had maybe an inkling of it, but we wouldn't have known specifically what was happening on that host.
And again, the alert fired on the second one. The first one was just something that looked suspicious, and in this case it was because it used a user agent string that was unique to this host that it never saw before, and it says, well, that's weird.
Cool. So keep that in the back of your mind, those URLs there, because the other piece of this is going to be now that data that we're getting from sysmon. So if we pivot over, and we're now looking at process data from the host. So this is that other command that automatically gets run and dumped in for our analyst to view. And what this does is this pulls all the data that we have from sysmon in the SIM. It's going to be set up in the same manner chronologically. You're going to get the type of event that occurred, whether it's process created, network connection. This is filtered, and this is actually only process data. But you're going to get the contexts all up and all along here of the process that ran, the command line that actually ran. So in this case, right, you'll actually get this whole command line up here that you know, AV ran with these parameters. And then you'll get some additional data over here, right? You'll get parent process IDs themselves, parent process command line, so you can actually see what was the command line that ran that called the process running, and then all of that relevant hash data. So in that same vein, we don't want to have to go through and look at all of this process data and look, you know, understand it if we don't have to. So we use those tags, and we use those same things that get applied intelligently and say, don't show me anything that isn't tagged as suspect or some kind of suspicious behavior. And now we've gone down to, you know, a very small subset of lines. And what we'll get are some of those tags for some of those admin tools that ran. We know that, you know, that attackers love to live off the land. They love to use tools that are already on the host. And we'll tag those as well, because that's not commonplace for somebody working in an accounting department. They don't need to be using PowerShell. Now what we'll do is we'll be able to look at that parent-child relationship that we talked about, where you get the application that ran in its parent, and we'll follow that up and down the chain. So highlighted in red is that suspect, right? This is the actual process that ran that our SIM rule fired on. And what it is, let me do the same thing. Boom. Is that a little easier? In this particular case, this is exactly what ran. We saw cmd.exe ran, and in the context of this, we see that the parent process for CMD running was Microsoft Word. So we know that that's suspect. And if we go back and we actually look at the command line that ran when CMD ran, and it's up top here if it's a little easier to see, you can see that CMD, Word spawned cmd.exe, and it actually ran a PowerShell session, and it pulls down, right, downloads a web object, and you'll see up in here an executable name. And then when I said remember those URLs later, is you'll see that it tries and then catches using the web request for those two files. So now instead of just having proxy data and I see web requests for two PNG files, I actually have the originating process that it ran, the context of who made it, right, or who ran that CMD, and I see the actual command line that ran, and now I understand exactly where those web requests came from. It started from this. Let's go ahead and go up and down that chain real quick too and just touch on that. If we go up the chain, we can see some more of these events occurring where PowerShell's running, and PowerShell ran, again, within the context of CMD as the parent, which is exactly what we expected to see. We know that CMD ran a PowerShell command. and it's running. We can go up a little bit further, and we can see, maybe how did we get here? Maybe this is normal, even though it's not. How did we get this Word document on the host? Well, if we go up another couple lines here, we'll get this parent process, and we'll see that when WinWord opened, what was the actual file name that ran? Here's in the command line, Word opened out of temporary internet files, content, Outlook, and then this secure message.doc. So we know just alone off the path that this file actually originated from an Outlook email and opened up in the temporary internet files. So you're getting that bigger picture again of understanding not just what ran, but where did this come? Where did this come from? How did we get to this point? And we can continue going up the chain, but for we're going to go kind of pivot down here now and look at some of these child processes. So we know that the original malicious thing that we fired on was Command XE, and it ran PowerShell. We did see a couple lines in here as well for this executable file name, and there it is, this atsqy.exe. And same thing if we go just a little bit further down, a couple more lines, we can see that executable name ran out of the temp directory. We can see, again, same thing, we'll see some additional files created, we'll see another executable out of app data, and then what we'll see is this original but.rz that ran from a persistence standpoint was dumped into task scheduler. So task scheduling, again, is an admin tool, but it can be used maliciously to establish persistence or retry. So if this wasn't successful for any reason, or they wanted to do this on point, you'll now see that but.rz every 3 minutes is running from task engine. So that's highly suspect that there's an executable in our app data profile being launched by task engine.
You want to take the filter off and show them what it looks like in the raw. Typically when we do this, honestly, we don't put the filters in. We just ignore the stuff that's not highlighted and look through the data. It's just more for the presentation's sake. It's a little bit easier if we do that. But typically he'd just scroll down, look for the red. That's going to be your starting point. Find the red and then work back through the orange to find the root cause analysis, and then down the orange to find what it did after it executed.
And it's worth looking at it this way too, because it gives you an understanding that you got to remember this isn't the only thing happening on the box at the time, right? The user's probably doing other things, running other applications, and being able to understand and attribute back to that root cause while all of this other stuff is happening.
And this is in the lab too, so there's not a lot of user activity going on. This is just kind of the idle state. Scroll down too, because those scheduled tasks at the bottom, you might not catch the relationship of every 3 minutes. That might fall into the noise if we didn't have that highlighted out. So,
yep. Cool. I think we can jump out of that one.
Do you want to? We'll skip the Spore demo.
Yeah. Do you want to cover?
Yeah, I'll talk about it real quick. Oh, sorry. Where are we at? I got it. All right. So, for the sake of wrapping this up, this is the last thing that we really want to talk about. So before I talk about this, the lab is very much a forensics investigation like we just did on that last demo. We provided the Excel file, but I think our recommendation is don't use the Excel file or don't provide the Excel file. Go through the logs manually. We just think you'll get more value out of it, and it's probably more. He didn't give it to him as a great. Nice. You're welcome to give it to him as like an answer key at the end, and maybe like he can play around with it. But the reality is you're not going to have that in your travels. So. Better learn the basics off of Windows Event Viewer. But it's very much the same concept. It's a good exercise. What we did was we built a system in the lab, and we just owned it. We compromised it. We moved, covered our tracks. We moved laterally, went up and down the kill chain, and then we ask you questions based off of can you find this different activity. So hopefully you find it useful. The last thing that we want to talk about before we jump into the labs is one of the other more advanced analytics that we used on this data. So great, we have the log data coming into our SIM. Great, we have real-time events firing. We can do very fast investigations. This is all fantastic. But we knew that there was like a little bit more juice to squeeze out of this log data. How do we just learn more about our network? How do we know what's normal in our network using this log data? What we did is we took this data, summarized it, and each night we shove it into a relational MS SQL database. So we're summarizing every process that's running in our environment, and we say, tell me the name of the process, the parent of the process, the user, the machine, right? So we summarize it to that level, so pretty granularly. And we say, tell me the first time it ran, the last time that it ran, and how many times it ran in between. So we have all this into a SQL database, and what it ultimately gives us the ability to do is, given a file hash or given a process name, I can query and find out every machine in my environment that's run that file before. And that's really valuable when it comes to this concept of prevalence. Yes?
What type of retention do you use for that database?
We've never deleted anything from it. The summary's pretty good. I don't know how big it is, to be honest with you, but it's very manageable. As I said, we have thousands of machines that we're pulling those logs from, and we've never had to delete anything. So this concept of prevalence. If I'm doing an investigation and I come across a suspicious process, and I say, well, show me how many systems I've seen that on in my environment. If I see it's on 1,000 systems, my radar came way down. I'm feeling a lot better about things because it's probably goodware, right? We'll still investigate, but you know, my ears have gone down and they're not perked up anymore. If I've only seen this on 1 or 2 systems in my environment, I know that this isn't something that's normal, and I'm going to be a little bit more suspicious of my investigation. So having that concept of prevalence is really cool. The other thing that we have is we have a list of every file hash that's run in our environment. We just looked that up. We added a job to just look up those hashes against VirusTotal and look for things that we know are malicious that maybe our antivirus product had missed. Well, really, the really valuable thing that we got out of this is a combination of the two things. We have queries that run each night that say, show me the things that are low prevalence and have a couple VirusTotal hits. And that cross-section is really where we get a little bit more of the value. So this is something we're still building this up and trying to make it more useful. The prevalence is great out of the box. The VirusTotal lookups, well, because signature-based detections aren't as valuable, it makes it good at finding adware and potentially unwanted applications. You're not really finding commodity threats as they occur. But I think we do see a path where we could eventually get a little bit more value out of this database, this custom database app that we built. And those queries run each night, and then they send the data back to the SIM, and they fire alerts. And when we come in the morning, we look at these low prevalence processes that run in our environment that trip VirusTotal signatures. We had a demo, but I don't think it's all that interesting at this point.
Not relevant.
Yeah, I guess it's interesting. It's not relevant. Cool. Where do we go from here? So we're happy to take questions. We're happy to dive into any particular areas. You know, we toyed with the idea that you want to see how the sysmon configuration works, or if you want to see how wet configuration works, we're happy to go through that. I think that you can get that from Google. Right? That's been a well-covered topic. So you know, if it's between that and lab time, it's really up to you guys on what you want us to do.
I would be curious to see how you guys break down those event logs programmatically with PowerShell scripts.
Yes, the one thing.
Do you want me to come back or do another 2-hour presentation? I don't have the code with me.
Okay.
I can try to find some resources on how we do it. Unfortunately, I can't share the source code. Just the culture of how we handle code at the firm. It's IP that we can't open source, but I can give you resources to solve the problems the same way that we solve the problems, and show you. Is it really, what are you interested in? How do you work with Excel programmatically?
Well, in how you, that and how you turn, is event viewer logs, are those already in Excel format?
No. So we've done it 2 ways and kind of iterated to the state that we are now. There's actually another version of that Excel file that we have now. That the one that you looked at, I don't know if you caught it, but it just showed process data. We've actually got one now that shows you all of the different sysmon event types in one spreadsheet, and it has tabs. One tab is all the logs, one tab is just the process created logs, one tab is for each individual event type. we pull that data out of our SIM. So we're integrating with our SIM. So the log data is generated on the endpoints. We move it via WEC to collection servers. We ingest it into our SIM, and then our scripts just run against the data that's in our SIM. We did at one point pull the data directly from the host over the network using PowerShell remoting. Or I forget the name of the commandlet, but it's something that I can provide after the fact. But what you can do is write a script to pull the event logs programmatically from the event viewer, and then format. Then you can work with it in memory and put it into Excel if you want to. But I can give you resources.
Okay. Matt, you got it.
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry if this was already answered, but what happens if the Windows event logs were maliciously changed by a program? Does this have any sort of protection against that?
No. So if you're forwarding, if you're doing real-time forwarding to some sort of log management tool or SIM, you'll have the inherent protection that comes with that, right? If you're doing a forensics investigation on an endpoint and relying on the logs that live there, you can't stop. If the attacker has admin, you can't stop them from clearing the event log. But go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The other thing to consider is the sysmon agent that runs doesn't have any inherent protections either. So if the attacker wants to disable the service, there's nothing to stop them to do that. We have some things that we've worked on to try to harden the service. The reality is that if somebody has admin on the box, they're going to figure out a way to kill a process. There's only so much that you can protect it. If they're a limited user, you can do more. Inherently, though, you're on your own. If you got an attacker on the box and they're looking for it, they can shut it off.
So we do some things to try and counteract that to an extent, right? One of the things that we'll do is we'll look for things, right? There are events that get generated when an event log is cleared. So we'll actually fire alerts for if someone clears an event log in Windows, because that is also suspicious. So we can do some of that. To the point of you can't always, in this case, you can't necessarily protect the process. We have some things that we're doing where we can protect the service since it runs as a service. And actually, if any of you know, I'm going to plug him, Luke Smith, RIT. Luke and I have been working on access protection for the service itself. So while this is running on endpoints, if you have local admin, there's a concept within GPOs of security templates where you can restrict levels of access to services. So what we're doing is we're looking at ways to use specific group SIDs for only a select number of accounts that then we have stored in our password safe solution, but strip out the ability for even users that have local admin on the box to stop the service.
So that's a computer-based GPO?
Yes.
That's pushed from the domain controller?
Right, exactly. So it's computer-based GPO. It's stripping out all rights to the service to be able to stop it, restart it, any of that, unless it's those unique group SIDs that, again, even if you have local admin on the box, you're not going to have the ability to stop it. If you have system, if somebody pops it and you've gained system, that's a whole different scenario.
You wanna tell them about what the pen testers did to defeat it?
Yeah. So that's a good point. We asked them to see, since we were testing the ability to how much could we harden it, and while we removed local admin and every other account from being able to stop the service, less system. What they did is, in order to prevent us from getting those logs in that visibility, they went ahead and they just added a local route on the box to route everything they found in the GPO. They found the where we were forwarding the events to, and then they just added a local route on the box, a static route to route that and black hole it. So they just sent instead of sending it to our collector so that we'd get it in the SIM, they just black holed it.
So even if you hold the workstation, which you don't do anymore, we would have gotten the logs, right?
So if we had pulled the workstation versus forwarding, not if the route's gone, right? So if we're pulling from that same system, now in theory, if we pulled from multiple systems, and the problem is then you come up with duplicate data, right? You could argue that you could maybe have some sort of redundancy, but it could all be defeated in theory. So one of the things that we're working on is, again, you can't stop everything, but how can you detect that? So we can look at a host, and what we took away from that is, let's say we get logs from the source IP constantly, but that same host is also making web proxy connections and firewall events. If we see in the SIM that a host is generating logs from all sorts of other sources with that source IP, but we're not getting logs from that source IP, that means that the service either isn't running or something's going on.
So we're trying to put that together so that we can correlate and say, hey, if this machine's really offline, I shouldn't be getting any logs from any other sources saying that this machine's generating activity.
Any other questions? Yes.
I walked in late, but what are you guys using to do like log aggregation? You guys using Splunk, Elk?
So the aggregation piece, the initial aggregation happens with Windows Event Collector.
Okay.
I don't know if were you here for that?
No.
Okay. So we use
5 minutes ago.
Okay. So, okay. No. So.
again.
Hi, I'm Matt Janetta.
So we use Windows Event Collector, and we apply GPOs to our endpoints, and all of those hosts are instructed to go look at this box and say, hey, what subscriptions am I, should I be sending to you? And then on Windows Event Collector, we have a subscription that says, every host that checks into me, give me the system log, the security log, application log, and we're using it beyond just those use cases, right? We're using it now on our print servers. So we said, hey, we care about print jobs. We want to see if somebody's printing off the entire source code infrastructure before they leave as a means for an exfiltration of data. That all gets logged from a print server perspective to the local print log in Windows Event Viewer. So we're using this and taking it a step further and saying, forget sysmon, forget application, forget system. Let's look at print logs. And we use that now to forward from our print servers all of the Windows print job information and then get that into the SIM too.
But ultimately, it's QRadar.
Okay.
Yeah. Is our Splunk, yeah, our SIM.
Is our SIM. Any other questions? And again, I know this is difficult because a lot of what we talked about and a lot of the benefits that we get forensically from having those Excel spreadsheets and having the SIM, if you're talking for you guys using this in competition or even against one or two endpoints, the place this is really going to benefit you is having the data at least logged locally and being able to go look and see what's happening on the box. Or maybe if you have the time, turning on WinRM and setting up a collector in Event Collector and just telling a couple machines to forward to them so that you can collect all in one place.
I think that's what we got. Do they have everything they need for the labs?
I think so. So we have the sysmon export. So you're gonna need to install sysmon if you want to do anything with that. And then otherwise, it's like normal. Just go at it. The challenges are posted. If you have questions, ask the normal suspects and these people.
Yeah, we'll be around. Yeah, I think if you download sysmon from sysinternal's website, if you run it with -m, I think it installs the manifest. I think you need that in order to be able to render the events.
I'm going to throw that up in a notepad. I'm going to just throw up the... yeah, start by grabbing sysmon from sysinternal's site, and then I'll just put the command line up. You're going to want to just dump that somewhere easy, and you got to use an admin command prompt. So if you don't have escalated privileges, sorry. Figure that out first. We'll go ahead and throw that up, and then you guys can get started from there. By the way, this is really hard to see, but this is the Swift config that I was saying is worth having a look at too. Same thing, go out on GitHub if you want to take a look at it and see. We have our own custom-baked flavor of this. I think theirs is a couple hundred lines long. Ours is approaching 500 lines, so.
So this is not the correct.
One or two that I think might be good.